How's it going, everybody? This is Dailies to Downloads. We're back with our part two of our horror movie heroes. We talked about our favorites in the last episode. Now we are going to talk about who we think is the worst of the horror movie heroes. And so with me again, I have Tony Farinella, I have Leonard Hayhurst, and Eric, and Jeremy Thomas, and we are going to entertain the daylights out of you. So this time, I'm not going to go first this time. I'm going to throw it to somebody else this time first. So, Jeremy, why don't you start us off by telling us who you think the worst horror movie hero or heroine is?
All right. So, and it's funny because I said Sydney for best. The worst is in that same era, and I love these films. I think that I love the first. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Second one's not quite so good, but Julie James is a goddamn awful horror heroine. She is the exact opposite of Sydney in so many ways. She doesn't have any agency in this story except for the brief period where she's like, I'm gonna go find out what happened. And even then, that's mostly Sarah Michelle Gellar Helen's push. She's horrible to everybody around her, despite being as fully involved as anybody else in the situation.
And that's Jennifer Love Hewitt?
That is Jennifer Love
okay.
Hewitt's
Okay.
character,
Okay.
yes.
Gotcha.
And I think Hewitt does a fine job with what's being with the role. The problem is it's just written in the worst possible way. She's oblivious to so many things. There's the scene in that movie that completely turned me off to that character. Is there's this scene in it late in the movie where Helen, Sarah Michelle Gellar's character, and her are coming back from talking to Anne Heche's character, and Helen sort of reaches like, what happened to it? And it's like trying to like reconnect a certain bit, and Julie's just like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I'm done. Blah blah blah. And she's awful, and she's not any better in the sequel, where she just has double opportunity to be whiny throughout and sort of stumble around while everybody else is she gets a little bit more agency, but not much. So she was my automatic pick for worst.
Yeah. And trying to remember, like, I haven't seen it in a long time, but isn't it essentially like a hit and run?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right? So these are not the most morally, just characters, I feel like. And they're like, why is he coming back for us? I'm like, well, you guys did kind of, you were in the wrong. You were probably, I would have.
Yeah.
Like,
And there's a whole thing in it where like they didn't actually hit that person. It was somebody who was like, it was a dead body essentially, but they don't know that. They don't know that until the very end.
Right.
They hit a dead body.
Like it's a whole thing. It's convoluted. It's based on actually a book. I did not realize that until not too long ago.
I don't think I knew that at all either.
Yes, it's based on a 1970s sort of mystery novel. It's changed significantly, and apparently the author hated the movie because they made it more into a horror film. Go figure.
Probably had a better title than the movie, if I had to guess.
No, it has the exact same title.
Oh, wow.
It's also still called I Know What You Did Last Summer.
I'm trying to recall what you did last summer.
Yeah. But no, I like the movie. I think that it gets a bad rap for being just another Scream ripoff, which I don't think it is. But she is awful. She is the worst.
Yeah, no, that's a good. I did come across that in some of my research, and it was tough. I agree with you. Like, she is a bad character. It was tough for me to go with that one simply because at that time, as a young man, I was infatuated with Jennifer Love Hewitt.
I mean, who wasn't?
So I didn't really analyze her good and bad sides the times I've seen the movies. But that's definitely a good one.
and actually, like, thinking of, sorry, just now I'm really got this track. Even in the sequel, remember, the whole reason they get that vacation to the Bahamas is because they answer, what is the capital of Brazil? And they say Rio de Janeiro, which is not the capital of Brazil. but that's because the serial killer is tricking them to get them to this damn island. So, like, these people are really stupid. You know,
Yep.
like, I mean, look, I know we didn't have Google in 1998, I guess, whatever, but like, I mean, if you calling it a radio station and you get the answer wrong and you're flying to at that point, I think you kind of deserve, you know, at that point.
We had Alta Vista in 1998.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And remember the killer's son is named Will Ben's son?
Yes. No, the
I mean,
sequel is
these
just,
people are stupid. You know?
the sequel is so bad. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, Tony, what's your pick?
I went with someone because if you hang out with this guy, you're probably going to die. Alex Browning from the Final Destination film, because he seems to know everything, but he's always like a second too late to the proceedings. And I wouldn't want to hang out with someone who knows when I'm going to die and is not telling me, not informing me, not keeping me in the loop. And I like the Final Destination films. I mean, you know, I know some are flawed and I like the 3D version, and I like Tony Todd in them. But just the fact that he's in these films, you know, Alex Browning, and he can like, he's like that friend who like at the last second he tells you when it's going to happen, and you're like, well, if you had told me 5 minutes ago, I could have lived. And he had all these foresights, and just to me, he's not really a hero because so many people die at his expense. And he was played by, you know, Devon Sawa, who, you know, of course, we had the luxury of seeing him in John Travolta's The Fanatic, which was directed by Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit. So, I mean,
Oh, you went
of,
there.
Sins against a lot of sins against cinema there. So, you know, Devon Sawa as Alex Browning in the Final Destination film.
No, yeah, that's you know, those movies. After that first one, especially, it just became like, you know, it's almost you feel guilty because it's like I'm just gonna go to these movies to see how people die. You know, that's like the weird way, like the fun part about it. It's like, what's the convoluted, you know, weird way that people are going to perish, and like you don't really remember, aside from Devon Sawa, I would say, the characters that much, other than the fact that they have escaped death, and death is, you know, trying to, you know, catch them in some way. But no, that's definitely a good one.
I will say it's funny. I actually remember, and this is another mark against him. I actually remember Ali Larter stronger for that movie than I do Devon Sawa. Perhaps because she has one of the worst horror names ever. Her character's name is Claire Rivers. But I generally, when I think of that franchise, I think of her over him.
What were you saying, Eric?
And she returns in the second one.
Yeah.
It's like that was one, like things like Final Destination and things like that, where it's like the villain is an entity, maybe. It Follows is another one. It's like, what are the villains of these? Is Death doing anything wrong? I mean, it's named Death. I mean, you would assume it's coming to collect, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, it's always, the Final Destination ones have been fun because you can't win, right? Like, if we're going by the great horror heroes knowing how to defend for themselves, it's like, well, how do you you're just prolonging it. You're not actually going to beat it, right. I imagine. But yeah, that's a good one.
All right. So we will, you know what, we'll go to my pick at this point. And you know what, I don't have a lot of notes, but I will say Micah from the Paranormal Activity movies. Look, you know, this isn't a review of the franchise necessarily, but I hate these movies. I really do. You know, I like horror movies that, you know, are intelligent to some degree, and like, to me, these movies rely on cheap scares by and large. And, you know, his character to me is just, you know, you want to, you know, do like the cartoonish, you know, at least, you know, because there's a guy who's, you know, I believe it's his wife, not his girlfriend, but who is, you know, being haunted by this demon, and, you know, he's going out of his way to, you know, I got to buy more cameras, you know, I got to document this, you know, companion of the year would probably not go to him, but but yeah, that's really all I got. I to me, like, if a character's super annoying, it's just a major turnoff. And to me, in that movie, by and large, you don't really get behind them that much. So yeah. Any thoughts on Micah? Anybody like those movies?
I like
No, and I think it's a great pick. And oh, sorry, Jeremy.
No,
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
that's what I was going to go with, because I remember just watching him and him being extremely unlikable, Chad, like you said, and he's a horrible husband, and just he's so singularly focused on capturing this at the expense of his wife. What was her name? Kate, I believe,
Katie.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, Katie.
Katie.
Like, he's so singularly focused, and like, as a married man myself, it's like I would be like, you know what? I'm going to buy a high definition camera. I'm not worried about my wife. I want to find out about this entity, and just how obsessed he is with it, and the fact that, like you said, Chad, that it spawned so many sequels and ripoffs. I mean, the worst, in my opinion, was Paranormal Activity. Was it Ghost something?
Ghost
Jeremy?
Dimension.
Ghost something?
Yeah.
It was the
Yes,
last
that one
yeah.
was absolutely terrible. Absolutely
Yep.
terrible. And they kept getting worse and worse. And I mean, we've had jump scares with films like The Grudge and whatnot, but this really brought the jump scares to a new level, to where if you went to the theater to see them and there was people under the age of 18, you knew they were going to annoy the crap out of you, and they weren't going to be able to sit still, and they were going to be laughing, and just horrible theater experiences. Highly overrated films, which I think is proven by the fact that now I think the first one's like 11 years old, and it is not aged well, and people don't talk about them in really high regard. But when the film first came out, and I know, Chad, you said you don't want to talk about it too much, the film, but the film, like, you couldn't get in to see it. Like, it was sold out everywhere, and it was a little film that could, and it kind of took over Halloween, to where Saw no longer had the stranglehold on Halloween. And so it's like we replaced Saw with Paranormal Activity, but Micah, just everything about him, you just wanted to punch him right in the face. Just couldn't stand him.
No.
I did a small little happy dance in my seat when you meant he's my number 2.
Okay.
I will defend the first 3 of those films. I think they're a little bit better at building tension. The last 3 are not good. I like sort of the twisted continuity of the first 3, but there's no defending Micah. He is the worst. Like, if you are imagining that these are supposed to be like a Blair Witch situation, where this is supposed to be very realistic, and he is the character I'd want to punch in the face, because you don't, if there are demons or not, whether you believe it or not, the thing to do is not like bring in a Ouija board and like taunt it and piss it off, because even if it's not there, clearly your significant other is a believer in that they're there, and
Right.
then you're just mocking them.
Right.
So he's the absolute worst.
He's a real. I mean, if you have a boyfriend that wants to put more cameras in the bedroom, you just need to wake up. You need to wake up and get out of that relationship quickly. And then when he brings in a Ouija board, you really need to run, girls. Just get out.
Yeah, it's maybe look on one of the dating. Maybe those apps weren't available back then, but yeah. She could put on her profile that she's looking for somebody else. Might be possessed by a demon, but I'm eager to date.
Change my mind.
Yeah. All right. So
Paranormalmingle.com.
All right, Eric, what's your pick?
Okay, so for this one, I also I was thinking of someone who was maybe conflicted, and I'm giving this some little preface of information, because this is from a sequel, because in the first one he is definitely a villain, but in the second one he is trying to start a new life, and he's on the right track, but he's a little slow on the uptick, and he's a little not so wise, but he's trying, because he's been hospitalized for 22 years. I'm talking about Norman Bates in Psycho 2. that's for the first 90, 100 minutes. He's sticking to. He's got a new job at the diner. Bodies are starting to pile up again. He's not sure why. He thinks it can't be his mom because of his rambunctious youth. But disregarding those things, I feel like he is someone who I found it very interesting. I like Psycho 2 a lot. The novel is very different, but the film almost like it does have him as a protagonist, but as clues start piling up about, and by that I mean bodies start piling up again, and he's not responsible, but he's not totally in touch with reality, or he eventually cracks, and someone arrives at his. He does move back into that house because hey, it's great real estate. You don't give that up. You keep that in the family. That's a 2-story mansion. And so then this woman shows up. Turns out that that's his real mom, and that sets him off. Of course, because if you don't do therapy on a weekly basis, things can happen. And so, he kills her, and then the lights of the Bates Motel come back on, and now he's back to being a killer again. And again, this is probably not necessarily what we would call a horror hero, but it does, for the first, 90% of the movie, you do think that this is going to be a very different, it is a very different direction for that character to go into, where you're actually meant to sympathize, or at least empathize with him in certain ways. And then it just doesn't work out. And he goes right back to where he started from at the beginning, or at the end of the first one, if you will. So not a dumb character, but someone who was a reformed character, perhaps, who ultimately disappoints me because he gives in to his worst instincts, which we've all done, not to that degree. But yeah, Norman Bates for Psycho 2 is my pick.
No, that's a good. You know what? And I think that franchise overall is underrated. I mean, obviously, the Hitchcock one is a classic, and rightfully so. And so, a lot of times when you have a movie that's that revered, nothing that the sequels or prequel or whatever will live up to certain people's expectations. But I think that franchise is very good, and it's been a while since I've seen Psycho 2, but I remember liking it a lot as well.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. With that, having all that baggage, like people are going to see Psycho for the first time, the original, Norman is also a protagonist up until the very last 2 scenes. You don't know what's going on, the twist. Yeah, and Anthony Perkins is great.
Yeah, and you're even in the show, you're supposed to initially, you root for him. You sympathize with him, and obviously, as in the movie franchise, it turns, but yeah, no, that's a good out of the box pick.
And a lot of people I've ran into don't know that there's a Psycho 2,
right,
3, 4. And I actually like the franchise as well. I never thought of it from Eric's perspective before, but he's right. He's going to make a great protagonist. Yeah, those are actually pretty good films in and of themselves. Of course, it's hard to compare to the first one. I think that's a bit of the problem.
Right.
But I do remember liking the franchise overall.
Absolutely. So our last pick, Leonard, what do you got for us?
Well, mine is coming from a sequel as well, and it's because of the way the character declined throughout the course of the franchise. And I'm going with Tommy Jarvis, as played by Tom Matthews in Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. For me, this is a character that went on a steep decline, like I said, from his initial appearance, which was in Friday the 13th, Part 4, as played by Corey Feldman. There, he's a resilient, tough little kid. He knows horror movies, which helps him to, set up and take out Jason at the end of that movie. Then in Part 5, which I think is very underrated, I actually really like Part 5. He's tricked by a copycat killer that leads him to a psychotic break. But then Part 6 happens. And in Part 6, in wanting to make sure that Jason is dead, to be 100% sure that Jason is dead, when everybody knows that Jason is dead at this point, he accidentally brings him back to life by flipping out on his corpse, stabbing it with like a metal rod that gets struck by lightning. And this is really the point in the franchise where Jason becomes like this super strong, supernatural, killer. This is the point where it shifts, and he's the reason for that. And at the end of the movie, he dispatches Jason by putting him at the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake, locking him in chains. But if he would have just left well enough alone in the first place, then that wouldn't have mattered. And actually, when we get to the other two people we're thinking of, are also along the same lines of just leave shit alone.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember like one of the things I used to do, certainly before I had kids, was whenever they would run marathons on TV of some of these franchises, specifically Friday the 13th, I would always, plant myself in front of the TV and I would watch them. And I remember the first time I didn't go through them by renting them. A lot of the sequels, when I first saw them for the first time, it was through one of those TV marathons. And I remember when it got to that one where he was struck by lightning, I was just like, okay, wait, we made a turn. Like we're going crazy here now, but yeah, that's a
in
good
his defense. What if they had cremated Jason?
Well, that's why he was digging up the body, because he wanted to cremate it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
But then as soon as he saw the body, he just flipped out and just started stabbing it with a metal pole during a lightning storm.
Okay. And then Jason wakes up and kills his friend in like 2 seconds.
Yes. Yeah.
And then he gets over that really fast. He's like, oh, well, that's not me. And he runs into the truck.
Yeah. You got to be a real bad horror hero if you actually just create the problem.
That's
right. That was my thinking.
Absolutely. So as we did when we discussed some of our favorites, there are plenty, especially in this genre, of horror movie heroes or heroines that we don't like. One that I would say comes to my head is Louis Creed from Pet Sematary.
He was on my list.
And if we're talking about people who need to leave shit alone, like I can think of nobody better than him, who kept going back up there and
3 times.
Yep.
He did it 3 times.
Yeah.
So yeah, does anybody else have any more that they hate that they want to mention?
I have one that I definitely want to mention. It was real hard not for me to put this on at the top of the list. I will preface this by saying that with the exception of 2 films, I am not a fan of Eli Roth as a director. I just, his movies, no, not my thing. I think Cabin Fever is horribly overrated. I don't think anything he's made except for House of the Clock in the Walls since Hostel Part 2 is even worth 5 minutes of your time. But Paxton in Hostel is one of the most infuriating, unlikable horror heroes I have ever seen. Like, to me, that's one of those key elements. You have to like the character, or at least have some empathy or sympathy for them. These guys, you can't take the 2 side characters. You can't take Josh and whatever the other guy's name is. I literally can't even remember.
That's all right. We'll put a graphic up.
Yeah. You can't take those 2 and even count them as heroes because they die too quickly. They don't have a chance for like the heroic moment. But like Paxton, first of all, he's not likable. He's pretty much an asshole throughout the entire movie. Like I said before, in the hero one, a key thing is agency. He only gets free because the guy that's torturing him screws up and cuts his bindings free, and then he has about 5 minutes of pseudo heroism, kills one of the bad guys at the end, and then gets on a train. Like, what's to possibly like there?
Now,
the Hostel ones, and then the Hostel sequel, the main character gets out of being killed because her family has money.
I will defend the Hostel sequel. I used to hate it. I watched it just about a week ago because a bunch of people had told me, you rewatch it, you will change your opinion. and I like it a lot more. I do. Yeah, that's the one problem with that movie.
The real villain is American exceptionalism and capitalism in
Yep.
the hospital films.
Pretty much.
That's really the thing.
I mean, Eli Roth is the true villain of the
That's true.
hospital
Yeah, that
film.
is true as well.
So
Well, I want to add one real quick.
Or go ahead, Tony.
All right, thank you. In the vein of Hostel, it just made me think of Detective Eric Matthews from the Saw films, played by Donnie Wahlberg, and the fact that his son is in the safe the whole time, and he's sitting there having a conversation with Jigsaw. He's letting his emotions get the better of him. I guess you could just lump in any cop from a Saw movie.
Right.
Just makes horrible decisions.
Great
Like, there's
detective
been
work,
any cop
officer.
I know, like, I mean, I know these are shot on really low budgets to make fast money, but I feel like out of all the detectives in the Saw movies, Eric Matthews, and he keeps coming back. Like, you
Right.
think he's dead, and then he was back in the third one, the fourth one. So he was, I guess, any kind of hero. I mean, Lawrence Gordon, I guess, is sort of considered a hero, but then, like, at the end, he shoots Adam, and he's cutting off his foot, even though everything's okay at home. So I guess Lawrence Gordon and Eric Matthews from the Saw movies kind of are popping in my head right now.
No, absolutely. That's a good one too. I've been meaning to rewatch some of the Saw movies this year, but
If anyone wants to saw off their own foot, I that's okay. If they saw off someone else's, then that's questionable. You want to do your own to get out of a bind, I guess. But, I would also just mention one that I felt like I got into like so many debates with people last year, which or interesting conversations, and that was the boyfriend. I don't remember his name in Midsommar. Because it was almost like a Rorschach test, depending on how someone may have seen the character or relationship or things that transpire in the movie.
Wait, people think he was a hero?
Not a hero. No,
Okay.
no, not a hero. Not a hero. But I mean, like, he's. Is he a villain? We try to break it down. Is he a protagonist or antagonist?
Right.
He would obviously be more on the antagonist side. Does he deserve to his fate that comes his way? Who could say? Look, she had a crazy family, as that first 10 minutes shows us. So I feel like there have been interesting discussions. Yeah, not as a protagonist, but he's not. I don't know. Yeah, I guess maybe he is the ultimate villain of the movie. Like, it depends. I mean, like, people again have very different interpretations of a lot of things that happen in that movie, or even if the cult, if you will, are really the bad people, or they're just sticking to their plans. You guys came here. We were going to jump off a cliff, and you want to watch us.
I mean, they were certainly better for her than the boyfriend was.
That is true, except when they force that fish on her. Then
Yeah.
you gotta ask what they want to eat before you do these things. Like, it's a little, but yeah. And then there's the other guy that just is working on his dissertation, and he's he's a real academic, and then he's got to go. There's a lot of, and those guys are also different shades of protagonist or antagonist, or just in the hostile way of, like, all these people are annoying and I don't like them, I guess. But I feel like Ari Aster is good with that, and even with Hereditary too.
Yep.
Like, the hero, who is the antagonist? The dead grandma that set this whole thing up. Like,
right.
Maybe is it the young son, or is it peanut allergies? What is it? But yeah.
No, there, and like you were saying about the gray area, that's like sometimes a hard thing to do in any movie genre. But yeah, I mean, especially in Midsommar and Hereditary, they both have, you could use things in different ways depending on where you're coming from, which is what makes those movies good. Absolutely. Well,
I mean, also the fact that they just fuck you up in the head completely.
That's definitely Midsommar.
I have one more name on my leaving shit alone list, and that was Kaylee Russell in Oculus, as played by Karen Gillan. She goes out of her way to get this mirror, enters into a battle of wits with a mirror, and then gets her ass kicked by not being as smart as she thinks she is against a mirror.
I mean, yeah, I love that movie. I love basically everything that the director's name escapes me right now, but that he does. He did Haunting of Hill House as well.
Of Mike Flanagan.
Mike Flanagan, yeah. Hush is an amazing movie. She was almost the head of Hush was almost in my heroes list, but yeah, no, Kaylee makes some bad choices there.
I need to see Oculus.
It's
How
good.
do you prepare to fight a mirror though?
Like she's smart about it. Like she sets up this whole thing where it'll break the mirror and stuff, but just leave well enough alone, girl.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the movie as well, I should say. But when I got on this thought pattern of the worst horror villains seem to be ones or horror heroes, I should say, just don't leave things alone, she came to mind for me with that.
So that's our final note to Hollywood. Although some of these movies would be pretty short if the characters just left shit alone, but
in real life, you would leave shit alone.
Right.
There was somebody I watched something, I can't remember what it was, but something about like all these people needed to do was communicate. I can't remember what movie it was. Like all the boyfriend needed to do was say like 2 things at the start of the movie and they wouldn't have had problems, but then it would have been a 5-minute movie.
That could be a lot of different titles, probably.
Yeah, I can't remember. Was it?
All right. Well, we thank you for joining us as we talked about horror movie heroes that we liked and we disliked. So our friends will not be joining us next week, but we thank them for taking part in the discussion. And who knows, I'm sure that they will visit us again down the line. And as we said at the first part, Leonard and I do the nitty gritty, and Eric and I will be back with you next week. And we won't be talking about documentaries anymore, so that'll be a good thing. And so for Tony, Leonard, Eric, and Jeremy, my name is Chad, and we will see you next week.